Your scars will tell better stories than your trophies.
This is the Leaders Rising podcast. Creating bigger futures, building thriving cultures. We believe you can become a leader worth following.
Well, hey, Tom, as founding partner and executive chairman of Leaders Rising Network, welcome to the Leaders Rising podcast.
Hey, thank you. I've been looking forward to it.
Let's just cut to the chase and dive right in here. Take me back to the beginning. What's the first moment you recognized leadership at play in your life?
You're saying a couple of good words there, leadership and at play, because I can think of moments for real. As a little kid, probably 3 years old, being defiant with my mother, who insisted that I take my fire truck out of the gutter where I threw it and to bring it up on the porch. And I just stood up against her. And I paid a price, but reflectively I pay a price for that also. But as I say that, I'm thinking of my very first report card when I was in kindergarten. Mrs. Smith wrote, and it's very clear it was the very first report card, but it said Tommy is a leader. And I forget what the backfill on that, but it might have been Tom's pushing people around, which I never had the actual stature for that. But it could be that Tom was insisting, pushing, or corralling people, or it could have been that Tom was a good version of himself. So I have that report card, and I remember that story, and to the degree that I would backfill any of that would just be conjecture, because, like I said, I have sporadic moments, but people did follow me. I'll give you just one more, Aaron. You're saying go back to the beginning, but I distinctly remember I was in a parochial school during first grade, and I distinctly remember a conversation on the playground with Bob McGinnis, and we were required to go to church or to Catholic Mass regularly. But I remember a conversation with Bob McGinnis. I could take you there where I was standing, where I said, I think I want to be a priest someday so I can talk in church. So there's some of the earliest I can think of, but if you trace that into school days, high school days, into college, I was leading a lot of things that were put in front of me.
I think we're going to have to start a scoreboard for our team as we go through these conversations over the coming months and get a glimpse into the backstory of everybody, because already your story and knowing my story, defiance, we're 2 for 2 on that quality and trait at a young age. But such good examples. One of my favorite things is to look back and think about who were we at our earliest? What were those traits, the skills, the abilities that we showcased? How we brought those to life and what they looked like, and how they've now translated to where we are. Looking now at the other end of your career, what do you see now looking back that you didn't see along the way?
Well, I would affirm the earliest memories of me having a defiant dynamic, but there was a helpful dynamic related to that, and that is that to forge my own way, to think I've got a chance, things like that. And I'm also, again, formulating from my earliest days, but I was from a family that was a family of entrepreneurs. So it was expected, if your last name was Nebel, and in the community I lived in, it was a name that people recognized because people started things. And there was a construction, Nebel Construction, there was Nebel Electric, which was my lineage, but the name was attached to a lot of things. So as I look back, I would say I have been, I think, by nurture, meaning a formulation in life to start things. And by nature, I think some of that fits. I can't hear the word no real well. And let me backfill a little more, Aaron, and then take us where you want to go. But where I grew up, in a place in northeast Wisconsin called Sturgeon Bay, there were very large shipyards. And that goes back to World War II and prior to that, but they would build these huge ships, 1,000-foot iron ore carriers and Navy ships, everything in between. And when I was a little boy, my dad would challenge me to build a business. And he would bring scraps from job sites, and it could be pipe and wire and wood and whatever. And he challenged me, like, make something. And I would make little ships for shipyard workers, and I would sell those things down at the corner whenever the whistle would blow and the old shift was getting out and the new ship was coming in. So I guess that's my thought. Looking back, yeah, the contact tracers of trying things, think I have a chance, willing to sell from the earliest age. I think those are the things that I'd say would be consistent formulations. And hopefully some maturity along the way to exercise those gifts.
Knowing enough about your story from my perspective, I can see that entrepreneurial starting things thread and the intersection with what you told that friend in parochial school. Hey, I want to be a priest so I can talk in church out of the mouths of babes, right? So walk us through the pillars of your career in terms of leadership and what you saw and how that changed in each phase or chapter of your career.
I ended up taking my faith seriously, although it took a formulated, refined pathway, and I ended up going to a college that was a Catholic college, and, you know, it was that, at least in name, and there were priests and nuns and other people on the campus, but I went there because it was convenient. It was within an hour from where I grew up, but I went there because I really was serious about my faith pathway. And interestingly enough, as I immersed myself there, I thought there's a pivot in my pathway, but not completely. So I'm thinking, yeah, I had all the stuff in high school. You could look through the yearbook and go, oh yeah, Tom led this, that, whatever. But where it really got clear was when I was sort of bucking the primary culture there, and I started a faith-oriented fellowship group on the campus, and it grew and grew and grew and grew. And it was, in fact, we were recognized as like the #1 volunteer group or whatever on the campus there. But that's interesting, Aaron, because while I was leading, I was always leading as an outlier, at least when it came into college. So when I look at you invite toward the pillars, I think that I had a determination there to be myself and to do what I thought was right in a place where I was an outlier. And there were other things that play into this, but I'll just tell you that what happened is the entrepreneurial pathway combined with a faith pathway. It converged after college. I actually spent a year in Central Africa. I told you I was the Nebel electric tributary, but the idea was serving at a mission hospital there and doing electrical work and then learning to speak Swahili and things like that during that year. But I came back to the States just under a year. My dad was in bad health and he was close to death. And I got back before he had died. But what's interesting is after a while, I went on to graduate school in Denver for ministry, and I'm taking you on this pathway because I want you to hear the phrase I'm about to deliver. But there was a pretty well-known person speaking at a chapel service that I wasn't required to be at, but I was married at this time. We were both interested in entrepreneurialism and kind of forging our own way. But the speaker said, during the service, was talking about starting your own church. And I was like, oh, you just kind of triggered a lot of things. Some dominoes were falling. And he made this statement. He said, why would you want to inherit someone else's problems? Meaning go into a pre-existing structure. He said, why would you want to inherit someone else's problems when you could create your own? And I was like, bang, you just landed it for me. All this entrepreneurialism, all my desire for eternal things to be amplified, it came together with that very thought. And that then became my first really vocational journey. In fact, we returned from Denver back to our home state of Wisconsin, and we started a church from scratch in a town that needed something like what we were envisioning. Of course, it brings out all the insecurities. You start anything from scratch, and it'll bring out your insecurities. So the next pillar, though, was actually really thriving in that realm, but then also going down this birth canal of finding out how much was not right within my spirit, within my soul, within my maturity level. Because boy, it'll pull it out of you. You're 27 years old and you're leading several hundred people, and you don't deserve to be doing that, so to speak. But when do we ever deserve it? But it really unearthed a lot of growth in me. I mean, growth opportunity. And it showed the good and it showed the bad. But the thing that carried forward was that I was a decent public speaker and that I knew how to motivate people that way. I was good at building teams. And those things have carried through.
I see converging pathways. A lot of these traits that you picked up even from early childhood, and you keep adding and developing through each of these phases of life. What did that next phase look like? As they say, the prefrontal cortex is fully developed by your mid-20s. So now here you are in this entrepreneurial venture, leading teams and organizations, a leader of leaders. What did you learn in that next season?
Yeah, well, several things. First of all, going first was always tantalizing for me. So I actually, in the denominational group, the missional group that I was working within, they invited me to become the first regional director of what was called church planting. Basically meant the Wisconsin area. Because what was happening is I also had a national job at that time. It was like a part-time job with a few other guys that were starting churches. And we were rebuilding this denominational group. And we had all the defiance, all the ego stuff, all the run without permissions. I mean, it was an entertaining and
ask forgiveness, not permission, all those kinds of people.
Yeah. Well, and Aaron, you would have met one of the other people that I'm referring to because he and I were working with y'all in Richmond at one time, how you and I first met. I was the guy that was formulating some reproducible systems. So it had to do, how do you succeed? Let's just say in starting a church. There's a sexiness about it. If you're into ministry, there is. Like, yeah, I get to go first and start my own thing. But, man, there's a lot of trapdoors. And I was not happy with those trapdoors. And I did not like seeing people not succeed. Well, here's what happened, too, is remember I said that there was a guy who was speaking at when I was in graduate school. He became a further mentor for me, and he was the one that first encouraged me to get a doctorate in this kind of work, and he actually was the money behind it. In fact, he told me, raise the money you need, I'll pay for raise what you can, I'll pay for the rest. He really did that. He said, I just have one request, and that is that one day you do the same for someone else, which I actually did. Okay, but where I'm going with this is then I became the first national director of this entity, and it had international implications. Well, by that time I was writing books, and I was listened to by groups, denominations, missional agencies that were saying, wow, we want to succeed more as well. So those things happened, but along the way I'm refining. Now, if you play that quite far forward, I was doing that I was in that realm of leading on the ministry side. It might have been 25 years. It might have been that much. But, publishing and doing all those things. Then there was a big crash in my life. And there were some surprises that I needed to address that related to my marriage. And it eventuated in the decision to end the marriage. But what's kind of crazy about that is that it's people that I had invested in prior to that actually became my liberators going forward, because there was a parallel suggestion from other people that I leave that ministry side of things and come up with another thing to do in my life. So that leads us to the pathway, Aaron, where you and I actually started into a meaningful relationship in our organization called Leaders Rising Network. But within this substructure of this think tank called Giant, I was an early, they call us old guard now, and rode the wave of a high-touch, high-tech, what are we organization. Totally loved. They were very liberating for me, and I can get into that if it's helpful. But I will just say that we were also invited, hey, start your own organization along the way. And that's where Leaders Rising Network started to rise up in me. And really, out of brokenness, starting that whole new venture.
There's two diverging paths I want to go down, but I want to set an anchor real quick. This word that you used, we haven't introduced it on the podcast yet, and I think it'll be foundational for a long time. You use the word liberating and liberator as the verb, noun, two sides to that. Unpack that word for us, But then also, what did that look like for you to be liberated in that season?
Yeah, I probably don't have a textbook answer on what it means to be liberated, but people know what has happened to them. Something has been unlocked and like, wow, I am a better version of this, or I'm a truer version of this, or something has come alive in me. And, we do a lot of that with visuals, or it's called neurolinguistics, and our founders formulated a matrix. And I will just say, to the credit of our giant founders, there's so much awesome new innovation, but also repackaging of truth that's been real forever. And one of those things, it's just called the support challenge matrix, but it basically says there's two dynamics: support and challenge. There, now you know what that is. But we all know what it's like to be around, or we're going to start with saying the best leaders are those that can bring support and can bring challenge. Okay, there you go. So that, if you can bring support and challenge, the upper right, you can see that says liberate. And honestly, if you interview anybody or you do your own reflection, and we said, who are the greatest leaders in your life? They're probably not those in the bottom right, that all I do is bring challenge, but they don't bring support. Just listen to athletes, college athletes, pro athletes, when they talk about who was the best leader in their lives. Upper right hand, they're gonna start talking about grandma or mom or grandpa or dad or coach so and so, but it's never described as the person who's dominating. Someone will do that obligatorily, but they'll carry a lot of scars, and they're really, when they can better get around not just challenge but support, that's where they come alive. And you can see there's two other quadrants. There's the upper left basically means someone brings a lot of support, but they don't bring the challenge. Like, they'll be quiet lies, or they don't want to say something, or they don't want to hurt someone's feeling. We're never going to say, if you're good at support, to stop supporting. We're going to say, learn to bring challenge. We're going to say someone who's good at challenge to stop challenging. We're going to say bring support. And you can see when neither of those happen, that's bottom left, and that's gray and lifeless. So yeah, I use that word, and it's a common word for you and me, Aaron. And if you bring me a challenge on occasion, my proper response is, hey, Tom, can I bring you a challenge? And my response is, yeah, please liberate me, right? Because that person is for you.
The word "for" is such a powerful word, I think. We think about things antagonistically or in terms of oppositions, but when you do truly recognize that someone is for you, on your side, wants the best for you and from you, that is a complete game changer when it comes to your relationship and the trust that you're building with them. And for me, just to pull the thread of our connection, if I go back, we each knew each other in our previous chapters of work. Fast forward a few years, I don't even know what prompted me to Google you at that point and saw what you were then doing in now this chapter. I recognized, Tom was somebody who really wanted the best out of people around him. Let me reach out to him and reconnect. And that is now a 10-year journey all on its own that's brought us to where we are today. So I'm grateful for the journey of having been liberated by you and through your influence. And I'm excited in this season to watch you continue to build a platform and a venture like Leaders Rising Network to share that liberation beyond. And it's great to see things multiply like that.
Let me reflect on that for a moment, and to say, when someone moves on, let's just say from a ministry position, and there's been a dark element to that, shame can come on fast and furious. But here's where you step in, right? You chose to show interest, not kick me to the curb, and learn more of the story, and things like that. But that's liberating for me, that people follow. They'll follow people who have broken stories, and then sooner or later we look and say, oh yeah, that's all of our stories, right? What's the phrase? That your scars will tell better stories than your trophies.
Yes, and we always try to hide. We could go into a lot of our tools, but we tend to try to hide or shy away from that level of trust and vulnerability and transparency and think, well, if nobody wants to know about that, or they wouldn't follow me if they knew about this, when in reality, those are exactly the kind of people who are truly liberators. It's the kind of leader we're trying to build. Before we leave the toolkit, I want to ask, any other tools that have been particularly impactful or life-changing in some way for you as you brought them in and applied them to yourself?
There's a really key moment in this journey. That was while I was receiving training, shall we say, to become a consultant within this giant network. It was like a gap year for me. I mean, I had time off, I had some money in the bank, but I had to figure out my future. And while I was in this, quote, training, let's just say, there was a moment that was foundational to me, and it had to do with the tool called the 5 gears. It's a tool about being present with people and being productive at the same time. If you're over-present or over-productive, you'll pay a price. Okay, let's just say I'm always working. Well, that's overproductive, and I'm going to miss people. If I'm always multitasking, right, it's all that. No, or let's say it's the opposite. I'm never getting anything done, but I'm always wanting to connect. Point is, my son Andrew and I I was divorced or about to be, but I was in a condo, and we were going to watch a Green Bay Packers game on TV. Now, Aaron, you've been, just as you've invited me into flying squirrel space in Richmond, I've invited you into Packers space and brought you to Lambeau Field and that kind of a thing. But we were having what was a father-son day. My assumption was that's what it was. But I'll tell you what, we got in conflict with each other while we were watching that football game because he was not watching. And I was hinting, hey, what about this, what about that? He was really working his phone the whole time. And I blew up on him. This was 10 years ago. And it felt like a lot of the other blow-ups in our lives. One dominating the other and just pressing and pushing and all that. But I just learned that tool of 5 gears. It's basically, can we be in the right gear at the right time? Can we describe it to one another and use a common language? Like a football team might call a play in the huddle so they don't have to have a long conversation. And the bottom line is, I had just learned this tool, and I said to Andrew, who was 26 years old, he's 36 now, but I said, I just learned a visual tool that might help us. Do you feel like you have the capacity to listen as I show it to you? I don't recall, it must have been gruff, but I know he was open to it. We went through this tool, we discovered a common language, and basically we were able to do an autopsy on our blow-up and other blow-ups, and that basically, to use this language without going into it all, but he was over at my place to watch a game, but he was in 4th gear. He was in task mode, multitasking the whole time. And I was assuming we were in 2nd gear. We didn't have that language, but my assumption is this is father-son time and we're hanging out. But here's what happened, and it's absolute truth. After that blow-up, we looked at this tool. We made a decision. We said when we are together, we automatically go to 2nd gear unless we signal otherwise. Well, we started using this hand language to the point that a few days later he shows up at my place, knocks on the door. When I open the door, he's like this. He's saying, Dad, I know I'm in 2nd gear. To have that common language is a lot better than saying, okay, you're going to get off your phone, right? This allows us to go up and down, by the way, to call one another up, or to give a signal. I got to be in 5th gear, Aaron, right? We don't need to unpack it all. But that healed our relationship. And when I say healed, I am telling you, it healed us. So that's when it was just so apparent to me, I am going to do this and bring liberation, let's say, in every place I can. So I hope in the last 10 years, we probably had 6 times we've been angry with each other, maybe 7. 3 of those 7 times, let's say, I was about to call him afterwards to hit that bottom gear called reverse, responsive, backing up. And I was about to call him to say, Andrew, I need to back up and apologize. Prior to this tool, by the way, I really stunk when it came to apologizing. And honest to goodness, 3 of those times I was about to call him, he's calling me. Dad, I got to back up and apologize. So that's what set. I mean, right then, when I saw us heal, I always say it healed our relationship. Andrew says, no, Dad, it gave us a relationship. And when we started using that, I was like, I'm bringing this everywhere. And I remember a story, too, about you and your daughter, Tegan, and how she got the gears and you all started using that.
Yeah, it's such an impactful tool. I think that story from you and Andrew paints a picture of how the tools, we're bringing them in the context of a workplace, in workplace teams and cultures and organizations. But time and time again, the team and organization don't matter as much to most of us as somebody else does. There's some other relationship that's really the driving, motivating factor. And so for us to be able to see the impact to families, to relationships outside of work, all because the business chose to invest in themselves and their people, it's such an incredible journey to watch unfold, and as evidenced by your own story.
Yeah.
Well, Tom, let's pick back up the story in this chapter that we're in now. 3 simple words, but you put them together and you said, let's start this Leaders Rising network. What does it mean for you in this phase, in this chapter, to be pulling a team together and building what we're building now?
Yeah, I love the question, and it's interesting to me that that some of the dynamics that came over from this ministry career of mine I have certainly come into Leaders Rising, and I'll explain to you why. I have never been satisfied with good people being chewed up by a business choice, and the consultancy side of helping others succeed. There's people who will go into it with very talented and very awesome people, but under the wrong circumstances, they could fail, and I did not ever like that. Okay, so if you look at just the resume of my life as I was learning to see people do entrepreneurial business on the faith side, so to speak, and refining ways to help them succeed, clearly brought that into Leaders Rising Network. So when we are looking at other potential consultants, we are looking through the lens of, we want to make sure you have what it takes, so to speak, to be honest with you about that, or to call you up if we see some really good things that you ought to be considering, but then also to take them through like an environmental risk factor dynamic, right? So that basically means good people, really good people, could thrive in this particular situation under these circumstances, but if you put them over here, you're talking them into something that'll become a dead-end street for them. So that's part of what we brought into Leaders Rising. Now, I'll tell you what, before people start to think that I'm the mad scientist behind all of this, not really. I mean, in terms of helping others get going and having their tastes of it, people like you and our other partner and others that are on our team, it's because of you all. I mean, it's because of us all that we're actually building something that has legs and gives everybody a chance to succeed, which just means what? We get to help other people succeed and liberate and all of that. So that's what I'm seeing, and hopefully at least understanding my roots without taking too much credit for it, because it was when our colleague Jeff said to me, hey, I want to do it all with you, and I said, awesome, let's do it, let's roll. But then later on he was saying, even though I knew you prior to Jeff knowing you, but he's like, I think we could get Aaron in on this. And I'm like, no way, man. Come on. Seriously. Come to find out, you guys are really you're the how-to behind what we're doing right now, but we're not losing my imprint in terms of really, really fighting for that.
This chapter is pretty exciting because we're seeing these relationships, the investment locked in. We've spent the time. We've done the laps. I joke with people at times that, the very first iteration, we're a little more high tech now, but it wasn't until COVID that most people got to know Zoom, but we were on Zoom before COVID. I mean, all the way back to 2016, 2017, we're meeting in these virtual meeting rooms. But in other ways that we've been leveraging technology, becoming more high tech, I think back to some of our earlier iterations, that first cohort I was a part of with you and some leaders from quite literally all over the world. I think we hit 3 continents in that group, but we had one page. It was one web page, and you had to scroll down and keep scrolling down and down and down and down to download the PDFs and watch the videos. We've come a long way since those days in utilizing the tools and resources, but the core premise is the same. And I think that core premise of liberation being for people, finding the best of everyone and building, strengthening, or when necessary, jump-starting key relationships. It's been such an important part of our journey and our premise and why we do what we do.
It's interesting you say that, and I'm sure we're coming close to wrapping up in this conversation, but I gotta show you something that I keep near me often, and it reminds me of what you just said. So I took you back to where I was growing up, and that I was from a family of entrepreneurs. But my grandfather was the first electrical contractor in this area of Wisconsin called Door County, going back way back in the day. One of the earlier entrepreneurs, but his father was as well. And actually my sister became the very first electrician, a journeyman electrician in that whole area country. But I keep this near me, and I don't know how well you'd be able to see it, but it says Nebel Electric Shop, and it gives the phone number there for you. But I keep this because it's an important artifact to me, but it's also related to what you just said, Aaron, and that is that, in a sense, what we're saying is, if our leadership only goes into the world, and all we're doing is being a thermometer, meaning we're feeling what's going on, and we're doing our best to change it, but honestly, if you're not a thermostat or a smart thermostat, which can actually regulate, bring the heat up, bring the challenge up, cool things down, bring the support up, so to speak, and to be agile that way. That's the leaders that others want to follow, right? Not that you're just a victim. You don't have a culture of just being a thermometer and everybody's responding or reacting to what's going on out there. But leadership can actually be controlled and good, and to bring support and challenge. It creates liberating cultures. And I'm gonna wrap up with just a phrase that I know we'll use it on occasion, but we'll say, honestly, when you get to do the work you love doing with the people that you're coming to really love being with, not just within this team, but I mean our client base, it's really fantastic. When friends become clients, I'm good with that, but I got to tell you, it's even better when clients become friends, which is a normal thing, because you become friends for life. Always fighting for one another's highest good.
Spoken like a true connector, forming relationships, increasing the size of that Rolodex as the years go by.
Do you remember, Aaron, there was a time, I know you remember this, but I don't know if you recall it, and that is that I was in Richmond with you, and we had some kind of a team meeting, and it was like at a little virtual workspace, or it was was it U.S. Bank, or it was something like that, Capital Bank, I don't know, they had a virtual workspace. We were there. Well, as soon as we're almost done, I'm talking to somebody and I'm showing them some tools, and you're laughing, I think, on the call. Guess what Nebel's doing? He's talking to somebody right now. Do you remember that moment?
I do, the Capital One Cafe.
Yeah, okay, that's it. And that's just kind of the cool thing, right? You get to be the best version of you without being the annoying version of you, once you actually are a person who knows what it's like to be on the other side of you.
Tom, as we come in for landing, I want to ask you the question that we ask everybody, tailored to our conversation today. So around a bold step, what's one bold step that you would encourage leaders to take this month based on the journey you've had throughout your leadership journey?
Well, you're using the word bold, and for some this would be bold. I remember when I did it first, it was quite bold. And that was earlier in our conversation. We showed and I described a bit of the support challenge matrix. And guess what? We do all of those behaviors. Every leader does some form of liberating, some some form of dominating, some form of abdicating, and some form of protecting. But to understand your tendencies, you could do this. You could do a scatter plot on yourself. Just take a reflective time. And that might be bold enough for some of you, right? Just to say, wow, this is how I think I behave. You know, I'd give myself a green with my younger daughter, but I'd give it a red with my older son. And I'd put the way I treat my spouse is in the bottom left, or you know what I'm saying. You can just look at the people in your world and do a guesstimate or just a reflective time in terms of how I treat them in terms of my leadership. But the thing is, you could also invite somebody to say, hey, scatter plot me and tell me where you would put me, and don't come back with the yeah buts. Just receive it. And I did that early on. That was a bold move for me, and I actually did that with my sister, and I said, tell me how I come across to you. And I was really expecting her to say that I dominate. And she put her finger over the dominate quadrant, and she moved it to the protect quadrant. She said, it's not this. It's not dominate, it's protect. And I said, oh, how do I do that? And she said, oh, you dismiss me with humor, and you don't take what I say seriously, and you try to move on from stuff before we've addressed it. I thought, actually, I found I could receive that, but the visual will help. So that would be a bold move. Use the visual, not just the conversation. Don't do this without having something objective to look at. Invite somebody into a conversation. It'd be pretty interesting.
We'll include the tool and the instructions to guide you through that scatter plot exercise on our website, leadersrisingnetwork.com. You can get this in all of the episodes, get caught up. Tom, thanks for the conversation today. As you describe that scatter plot, it takes me back to something one of my early supervisors, Phil, who was the guy who introduced the two of us, he always used to say, you got to know what it's like to be on the other side of you, looking in the mirror. And that's how we've always described these tools. And so doing that scatter plot exercise is a way to look in the mirror, get a clear sense of a view of ourselves that we honestly can't have ourselves because we can't see ourselves. We don't know what we're like unless we ask somebody else. So thanks for giving us a peek into your story, your experience, and all the ways you've been listening and learning along the way. And thank you for the environment you're creating, the network you're building, and inviting us into it.
You're welcome, Aaron. It's been good to have a little walk down memory lane, but also a little look into the future, too.
Well, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Leaders Rising Network podcast. Connect with us on LinkedIn or visit online at leadersrisingnetwork.com.